welcome everybody to a brand new episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Sarfo-Mensah. And if this is your first time tuning in to this podcast, I welcome you and I hope that today's episode is one that will allow you to come back for more content because you love it so much. And if you're a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, as always, I welcome you back. And I hope that today's episode is one that you find informative, enlightening, and of course, insightful. So before we get into the main event, just a reminder, if you are on YouTube, hit that red subscribe button. Please hit it so you can get future notifications on new episodes of the Identity Talk for Educators Live podcast and other content of the platform. Also, if you're listening from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you subscribe there as well. And Identity Talk is now part of the Patreon community. This has been a long time coming. We've had a lot of people who have been following Identity Talk from day one when we first started this thing in 2019. And we're now in 2024, and the community's grown so much. And we now want to be in a position to give you all even more exclusive content. So this is where Patreon comes in. So if you're someone that has benefited from any of the content we've done over the past 5 years through Identity Talk, I implore you, I encourage you to become a Patreon today. Get engaged. Let's build together. Let's keep those connections going, and let's continue to grow the community. And then, of course, to catch up on past episodes, especially if it's someone who's new, you can go to our YouTube channel, which is under my name, Sarfo-Mensah, or you can go to our main website at IDTALK4ED.com. And then, of course, I got a book that's out or soon to be coming out in a few months called Learn to Relearn, Supporting Identity in a Culturally Affirming Classroom. This is the book that you want to have in your library. If you're a teacher, if you're a parent, if you are a professor, if you are somebody, anybody who loves humans and cares about the humanity of others and is committed to honoring and affirming the humanity of others, this is the book for you. And it's out on pre-order right now on Amazon and also through Routledge. You can go to the Routledge website as well. But for the main book website, it's going to be learningtorelearn.com. Over there, you will see the overview of the chapters as well as the accompanying resources that are going with each of the chapters. So it gives you a nice comprehensive view of what you can expect when you finally purchase your copy of the book. So it's learningtorelearn.com. Get your copy today. Tell a friend to tell a friend so they could tell a friend. Thank you so much. All right, y'all. So we're back with another episode, and today's guest is somebody who has been around the world. And she has a lot to share when it comes to multilingualism, when it comes to the importance of supporting our culturally and linguistically diverse educators and learners. There's so much to share about today's guest, but I want to reserve that for when she comes, which is going to be right now. So without further ado, I want to bring on Dr. MaryAnn DeRosa to come on and talk with us about her journey, her work, and what made her want to become the educator and grow into the educator she is today. So we're going to bring on Dr. MaryAnn, and we're going to get this conversation started. Here we go. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I was just on the Learning to Relearn website, Kwame. This is so exciting. Well, it allowed us to celebrate. You've got 5 years of the podcast and the book coming out. So I'm just going to go on in order it now. This is really great. So I'd love to learn more about it as we're talking today.
Yeah, we could definitely do that off air. Not a problem.
All right. I know. I'm trying to.
Yes. But this is about you right now. So how are you?
I'm good. I just finished a class, just taught 50 new pre-service teachers. I work for Relay Graduate School of Education. I'm a professor there. So it's really exciting. I'm always on this high after I've been talking to 50 educators around our country and the great work that they're doing and continuing their learning through this master's program. So it gives me some hope for the future.
Yes, absolutely. And a shout out to Relay. I had a friend or a college classmate who was a professor at Relay, but he's out in New Jersey.
Right.
I don't know if everybody knows each other. His name is Tony Hill.
No, I don't know him. Relay does a great job of hiring amazing adjuncts
Yeah.
and professors, people who are in the field, so it's a master's program, but they get people who have been in the classroom, know the kids, see the kids. So that's the great thing about it. And I actually get to design the content and the curriculum for Relay. So I get to be a little bit more creative and kind of put in my own beliefs and mindsets based on the research, but also make it fun because, as you know, Kwame, school's a little bit boring. And I think that we need to bring a little joy into the classroom. And teachers won't bring it unless professors or educators or teacher prep programs teach how to bring joy. We teach how to do all the other things, right? Like implement the graphic organizer, use this instructional move. But let's bring the joy.
Yeah, we have to be the model for sure.
Right.
We have to be the model.
Right.
Well, I want to go ahead and start with this question. And this is one that we give to every guest. Who or what inspired you to want to become an educator? How did this journey start for you?
Yeah, I saw this question. I was like, ooh, did I want to be an educator? Right. I think many educators fall into education. And I think the people that fall into it are artists, right? So I thought I was going to be this artist, this painter, making, creating, doing all the things. And, that isn't going to bring in the money to live, right? So I remember walking downtown Washington, D.C. and seeing this school that was an art school gallery. And I walked in there and I thought it was a gallery and for artists, but it was a charter school. And this woman just like ran down. She looked at me. She's like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, MaryAnn. Do you want to teach kindergarten? It's like DC, early 2000, 2001. And people, we need teachers, right? So like they're just picking them off the street at this point. And I was like, well, I guess so. So she like brought me up and was like, we need a substitute. This is the school that we have. And I just kind of fell into teaching, and I fell into the right place because this was it was called School for Arts and Learning. Mm-hmm. Actually, Reem Labib was the principal there. I don't know if you know Reem. But she from ALAC, right?
Yeah, I know Reem.
Yeah. So it was just like this perfect storm of a school, arts infused, inclusion, most of our kids had special needs. So that was the specialty, but some really cool artsy teachers, right? And that's where I got my roots and grew my wings, had great mentor. This woman, Kathy McKeon, who saw something in me. She was like, the way that you teach, I do the art things. And she really saw something in me, I guess, and then pushed me to get my master's in special ed. And then I went on to get my doctorate. And I'm really happy to be a teacher. It's like the greatest profession, the greatest gift.
It is the gift that keeps on giving.
How did you fall into education?
Honestly, for me, it wasn't one of those things that I aspired to do as a kid. I wanted to be an athlete. I thought I was going to be in the NFL. Right. I thought I was going to be a Major League Baseball player because I was a sports guy. I played basketball. I played football, baseball growing up. And to this day, I am the ultimate sports fanatic. I think most of my time spent on ESPN and watching sports podcasts, which can drive my wife crazy sometimes. But that's just who I am. But as far as how I fell into education, funny thing is, and I don't think I've shared this with anybody, I didn't start working with kids until I got to college. So I attended Temple University in Philadelphia. And of course, I'm 18 years old at the time. I needed a job or something to do because there was so much time I had to myself. So I'm walking on campus one day and I bump into this table. It was a display table. and there was this sister who I bump into, and she's like, "Hey, we're doing a mentoring program in my dorm. Would you like to volunteer?" Her name is Tamara Tucker Anderson, but now she's married, so she's Tamara Brown. So we used to call her Tuck for short. Shout out to Tuck if you watching. So Tamara, she pretty much was like, "Hey, would you like to volunteer?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." Had never worked with kids before, so this was something that I was doing after class. I'd go to this dorm, and we had a mentee that we would connect with for an hour or an hour and a half every session, and that was my first bug, I guess you could say, towards teaching. But it was just a volunteer thing that I did for a semester. But then the very next year, I found a work study job at the YMCA, which was near our campus. And I would go there 2, 3 days a week to be a tutor in this after school program. So I'd go there and I'd work with the kids who are coming from school. So this is like 3 o'clock, 3:30. So they are high energy. Like, yes, freedom, freedom. We've been
Right.
sitting in our classrooms all day. Now we're gonna turn up.
I love it.
So that was my first introduction to really working with kids and having to develop tools and learn how to manage them and get them under control and really test the waters. So I had no tools at that time. So kids were just walking all over me.
Oh
And
yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
thought, I
100%.
thought, let me just try to be their friend. And then you realize that's not the right approach to take because then
No.
they take advantage of you,
Right,
which
right,
I
right.
learned the hard way. But that really taught me a lot. I just enjoyed going there. I enjoy the fact that they enjoyed having me there to be in a position where, I'm 19, I'm 20 years old, and I have an opportunity to have that impact on
Oh yeah.
children that I was once their age. Like that was the thing that really drew me in. And the more that I was able to see my impact on them in a positive way, the more I was diving into this teaching thing, this mentoring, anything that involved kids, I just gravitated towards. So that work study job I would end up keeping for another couple years. As a matter of fact, I stayed at that YMCA from that point up until the time that I graduated. So I started off doing it as a work study job. And then in the summertime, I would work at the summer camp as a counselor and then come back the following years and work with the after school program. But by that time, I actually became a direct staff member of the YMCA. So I was getting a little bit more money. And I was still able to go to my classes during the day and keep track with my academics. But that's really how I got into it. So by the time I graduated from Temple, I had already had 5 years of experience with kids under my belt. But I was a math. My degree was in math. So I thought, well, what am I gonna do? I didn't want to go into business. I didn't want to be an actuary. I didn't
Nope.
want to go into accounting like a
Boring.
lot of other math people. I wanted to do something that involved kids. So I figured the best route for me was to marry the two. Marry the math with the kids. What profession could I do that involves both? So I thought, let me just be a math teacher. And that was the path that I took from that point on.
That's amazing. I think that you made the right choice. I think about, did I make the right choice? Because I'm still in it. I remember please stand up if you've been in the school teacher for 22 years. And then you'd see
Yeah.
these people stand up and you're like, no, that will never be me. And here I am 24 years later. But I love being a teacher. It is the greatest profession. It's a lot of fun.
It is for sure.
Better than accounting.
Yes, so much better than that. But I wanted to ask you about your own upbringing, like how
Yeah,
you
sure.
grew up and what was that K to 12 schooling like for you? Because that's where you just kind of took things for what they were. we weren't at that age where we were questioning
Right.
everything. We
Oh,
just
yeah.
was going with the flow. But I know in my case, I had my share of struggles that I dealt with as far as embracing my identity. Having two parents who came from West Africa, more specifically Ghana, and were immigrants in the US, navigating the society, and then, having the name that I had, having the dark skin complexion that I had. Like, I know what my struggles were. But I'm curious to know if you had any struggles, whether they be internally or externally, as far as being able to embrace your identity and showing up in your authentic self.
Yeah, it's so interesting now that we have the language for that, because I think at the time when we were young, we didn't know what it was quite, but there was things that were happening that like you notice. So I am half Greek, half Filipino, and I grew up overseas. My dad is Filipino. He was enlisted during the Vietnam War, because that's what the Americans did. They went to the Philippines and they got their cooks and janitors and laundry people.
Yeah.
So picked him up like from the village. His first bed was when he joined the Navy at age 22, and then they, straight to Vietnam. And then after that, he was stationed in Greece, where he met my mom, and they got together. But again, I always wonder about their relationship, because it's an interracial relationship. I don't know the full story there, but I can imagine it wasn't very easy for them. But I am so grateful for them. But when you talk about struggle, I think that struggle begins there, with our parents. You speak of your parents coming over to the U.S. And then he was enlisted Navy. If you want to know segregation, if you want to see segregation straight up in your face, it's the military, right? The enlisted people, Black and brown people, they eat in one place. Their children also have privileges other than the officer kids are the white, and they have their own place where they eat. We had two separate beaches. The officer kids, the white kids had the umbrellas. We could just bring our towels. Very, very in your face. Growing up at that time, that's just how it is. So we actually grew up, my sister and I grew up in Italy because my dad was stationed there. So there was, being a brown kid, I spoke Greek, but I also spoke Italian because it was, after school, only TV was in Italian. My friends were Italians. And then I went to a DOD school, Department of Defense school, where I learned English. So there's a lot going on there. I think my parents sheltered us from the things that, we just sit at the beach. Look at our beach. It's so beautiful. I'm like, well, why do those kids have the umbrellas? And I'd go over there and visit with my friends. But I think that the way that they sheltered us is like with a lot of humor, a lot of joy, and just having gratitude for having what we have. Even to this day, I'm like, Dad, you really deserve more. He's like, no. He's like, I can just sleep on the couch. I'm like, Dad, or like, I'll just take the bus to DC to visit you. I'm like, Dad, you can really, which I, despite that struggle, I think I'm so grateful for it, for being grounded in that gratitude and that joy that my parents gave. And at the time as a kid, you did want to be the officer kid, and you did want to be white because like all the people on TV were white.
That's right.
Yeah, right. I remember in my journal, I have it still. We moved to Scotland for a minute for 3 years because my dad was stationed there. But I was like, I am so happy to go to Scotland because there won't be sun, so I will be white. It's like, who does like or the Barbies and stuff like that. But I know now, I think we have the language now, that I'm kind of glad that you and I have some flavor. I'm serious. I'm kind of glad that we can step into the global majority and be accepted. And I am really proud of who I am now. And I think of it as a gift.
Yeah.
I do want to share that. I don't want other kids to go through, for example, what you and I went through as we were young.
But you know what, though? I envy people like you, and I'm gonna tell you why. Especially now that I have children, I have two sons, and I'm abroad. I'm around expats and different international folks who are just brilliant, and they just can speak all these different languages and learn at a relatively fast rate. And I always have been fascinated by just the way they're able to process and learn a new language. Like right now, my whole family is on Duolingo. We learning French together,
Oh, good.
family. And I'm somebody who didn't grow up learning my family's home language, which is Tree. So that's
Hmm.
the lingua franca in Ghana, pretty much. You go there, most people are going to be speaking Tree. And my parents weren't the type to force it on me or impose the language on us. I think with them, being immigrants in the States, they thought it would be in our best interest to learn English, be fluent in English, and allow that to be our navigation tool in society. Uh, I see it like that now, but then a part of me is like, man, I wish they had really imposed that need to learn the language on us. But no fault of their own. They did what was best for us or what they felt was best. And I'm thankful for it. I really am. But now that I have these two kids, I want to be able to pass on that language to them so that they don't go through the othering
Mm-hmm.
and the struggles that I went through growing up, especially when I lived in Ghana for a few years and I was going to school there and I was navigating my way over there to look like everybody, but then to sound different because of your accent and to not be able to communicate um, in the home language. There was always that stigma of shame
Right. Right.
from mostly elders, not so much the kids. Like my classmates, they were super cool and they understood. But for like the elders, they look at you like, "How do you not know your language?"
Right.
And then they almost shame you for not growing up in the country. And you're sitting here thinking, "Believe me, I wish I could speak it with you. I really want to. I'm trying to connect."
Yes.
It
Yes.
was so bad, Marianne, that when I was in school, I had a different accent in school than I did at home with my siblings and my other family friends. Like when I'm at home, I'm speaking normally,
Right.
normal American accent. When I'm in school, I was trying to speak in my Ghanaian accent
Right.
or
Good.
my best representation of it so that I could blend in. But I failed miserably in that. But that's how much I wanted to connect, and so that was something that really bothered me. But here's what I want to ask you, as somebody who speaks so many languages, I'm interested in knowing, how do you do it? How are you able to process different languages? Like the neuroscience of it. How does that
Right.
work for you?
Well, I'm glad you said neuroscience because, well, I think a couple of things when I think about you wanting to speak Ghanaian or Tree, and for me, I want to speak Tagalog. From my dad, there are
Philippines, yeah.
their values, right? There's the word like Greek is much as European. It's here, it's like top, But if you learn Tagalog, you don't really need to know that. So I felt that growing up. It's like you pick up the Greek, Tagalog is worthless. And I would love to pick up that indigenous language. My dad speaks Tagalog, Ilocano, his village language. And there's so many languages in the Philippines. But when you say he speaks Tagalog, Ilocano, English, it's like he's not multilingual, right? But if you see somebody who's like French, German, then it's like, whoa, you have all these languages. That's amazing. So I was wanted to speak to that because I am trying to learn Tagalog. But the way that you learn languages is you have to immerse yourself in the culture because the language is culture. Language is
Yes.
identity, right? And there are those mirror neurons, right? So like when you're in your classroom, you're mirroring the accent of your peers, because you're gonna connect with them, and then you have that allyship with them if you have that same accent, if you have the same gestures. So, I'm trying to learn Tagalog on. It's not even on Duolingo, actually. You got to get like the extra app to get Tagalog on. Right?
MaryAnn, you know that they only focus on the romantic languages,
I know. Just
which
like,
is a problem. That's
yes,
a whole nother conversation.
I know.
But go
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. So, but I'm not going to learn a language through AI. I mean, all this stuff about AI, we're going to learn. No, it's human. It's human. I'm
Yeah.
going to mimic you. So language acquisition, you don't learn a language, you acquire a language. So you got to move to a village in Ghana, or you got to go to France and live with your kids in a place that has no Netflix. That's like my kids too, because for me, learning Italian was so easy because I only had the Italian TV. So just being immersed. So what they call, the way that I learned, and we see them in international schools as simultaneous language learners, right? All at once, just coming in. I mean, we are born knowing or having the ability to have all those phonemes, right? Like there's like 400 phonemes. And as we don't hear them, our brain prunes those neurons away, and we're just stuck with like the 44 phonemes that we have in English. So that's unfortunate, but that doesn't mean you still can learn. You can still learn, but you have to be in the culture. So you're acquiring the gestures. You've seen it, right? Like when you're
yes.
right. You do it immediately. You're like in Italy, you're all of a sudden using your hands. Or when I was living in China, you're just like boo, 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 and the eyes. My sister speaks French, actually, and she says you have to move your eyebrows I'm like, you're right. Her French comes out more accurate if she's using her eyebrows.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about the immersion part. That's how my sister finally was able to get fluent in Tree.
Oh yeah.
She lived in Ghana. She was going there periodically to do her doctoral research.
Oh wow.
And she had that extended period of time where she was there. She was going to a university to get classes on Tree. Whenever she was out and about, she was speaking Tree to people in the neighborhoods. So she was getting that repetition. She was strengthening that muscle every single day.
Exactly.
And that's what ultimately got her to be fluent now. I have yet to have that experience. So I know when I do go to Ghana for a week or two at a time, things start to come back to me.
Right.
Because I'm immersed
exactly
in the culture. But then once I leave, it's back to being in this monolingual world, because everybody in my house, they just speak English. Nobody here is speaking multiple languages.
Right.
So the only time I can get my practice in is when I talk to my mom on the phone, because my mom, she speaks Tree, of course, and my sister too. But I need more than that. Like I need to be able to be immersed, so I could feel comfortable, so I could get my practice in. And it's hard to do that when you're not around people who can speak the language.
Right.
So that's been my struggle over the years. I still keep on trying because I know how important it is.
It's so important. And again, we're on identity talk. It's if you have a language of another culture, of another community, you're already in that language, right? You're in that community. I think that, when we talk about the US, and there's a lot of new dual language programs, and we're really embracing Spanish. I mean, in some communities in the US. And then there are other communities that don't want that. And it's interesting how it's not about the language, it's about keeping your culture, right? It's either keeping people out. Language is super powerful, and language is political.
So this season, Identity Talk for Educators Live will be including ad spots for businesses, products, and events that are adding significant value to their communities. And here's the catch: you don't have to be an educator or an education-based business to be a part of this. We're looking for people who are just doing great work in the community, and we want to use our platform as a way to amplify their work. So if you are an entrepreneur or you know of an entrepreneur who is doing just that, bring them in our direction. Have them reach out to us. If they want to learn more about their ad spots and how they can get themselves promoted on this platform, they can contact myself, Kwame at IdentityTalk4Educators.com. I'll say it one more time. It is Kwame at IdentityTalk4Educators.com. Hope to hear from you, and let's keep on amplifying our work and building each other up. Yeah, for sure. Well, I want to stay on this for a second. So we just talked about just the process of learning the language. Now I want you to wear your instructor hat. So you have pre-service teachers that you teach at Relay. And I'm sure you talk about multilingualism. You probably have some conversations around translanguaging as well. Shout out to Ophelia Garcia.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. I want to know, how has your own experience being multilingual, how has that informed your understanding of how you provide instruction for multilingual learners in the classroom?
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting because I remember I worked in a dual language school and I was a special ed teacher, and I was being observed by my principal, and I have, but I'm in the English section and I have some newcomers, and I look at one of my students and I tell him the direction in Spanish. And later on, I got my evaluation and I got dinged for speaking to the student in Spanish because it was the English program. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry I did that. Back then we didn't really know that it was okay to switch between languages or to translanguage to support the student. So now that we know the research, right, we all have this common understanding about language, about content, about topics, right? And all kids have those in their own home language. And when we use translanguaging, we're tapping in to that knowledge so that they can transfer it to whatever new language that they're speaking in. If it's tree for you, or if it's English for our students here in the US. So I think translanguaging is a key scaffold.
Yes.
However, it is a scaffold because now that the research is out there and everyone's like, we're going to translate language and we're going to translate everything. What now I'm seeing in schools as I go in and consult with schools and coach teachers, I'm seeing a lot of long-term English language learners, right? So they're coming to school, the English school. Their parents are here in this country to teach them English, but now we're translating everything for our students. And so as education, as you know, in education, like the pendulum always flips over. I think we need to use translanguaging to scaffold the English language. I think that this conversation is probably like, MaryAnn, I cannot believe you said that, but I'm a child of immigrants, right? Mm-hmm. My parents want me to access power. If I'm speaking Tagalog at home, speaking Tagalog in my school, I will not have access to what all the other English-speaking kids have. And I think we need to hold those two truths, right? Like, yes, identity, yes, belonging, yes, SEL, yes, translanguaging, yes, all those things that are asset-based, that we have this mindset that our students are full of gifts and they have strengths and they come in with that. Truth number one. Mm-hmm. Truth number two, the language of power, the language of access, of wealth. You can't say people don't want wealth, right? Everyone's like, don't say that. People don't want wealth. I'm like, people want to be comfortable, right? They want to have choice-filled lives. That is English, and that is academic, standard academic English. And so when I go into schools and we're doing all the other things, which are so good, how are we using that to make sure that they have choice-filled lives and opportunities that their parents came to this country, crossed deserts, to come and give them opportunity. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is what Dina Simmons calls, SEL with a hug, right? Like with a white supremacy.
White supremacy with a hug.
Right. Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. I was like, yes, that's exactly what I see happening right now. So I know that started with translanguaging, which I think is very important, and use it as a scaffold to make sure students are successful and have access.
And I think that's the key. The key there is access. Because when I think about my parents' decision for myself and all my siblings to learn English, it was because they knew that it was going to be access to those things
Right.
that you mentioned. That was the primary reason. My whole thing was, okay, we can do that, but not at the expense of losing our indigenous language.
Right.
Right. Or original.
Which what happened? It did happen though to you, right? You lost your language.
Which is what happened. Cause I never got to learn it in the same way because, English was the predominant medium.
Right.
Of instruction everywhere we went. So
right.
We couldn't escape that.
So how do we have both? How can we do both? I think that's
I think that's still something that a lot of school districts are still trying to figure out. I was working with a school in Massachusetts. So with one of my consultant jobs, we're charged with working with DESE schools. And there's this one school that had a whole lot of multilingual learners. They had students who spoke Hindi, students who spoke Spanish, students who spoke Portuguese, Mandarin Chinese, all in the same school. In some cases, all in the same class.
Yes.
And these are level 1 learners.
Right.
So they're the ones who are coming in. Some might be, I think, SIFE learners too, possibly. But they're all in the same classroom, which is a whole nother issue that we don't have time for. But anyway, if I'm a teacher, how am I getting all these different students who are coming with all these different languages to access the content that I'm teaching? Now, mind you, I was working with math teachers.
Right.
Math teachers, which is tough.
It's tough. I think that what is so great about being a teacher right now is that we know so much about how the brain works, right? There is learning science. There is, universal design for learning. Mm-hmm. We do have a lot of technology to scaffold, to support our students. I think this idea like variability, understanding that every brain is different. It doesn't matter. Every brain is different. And then the understanding that, but all brains learn the same way. Very predictable, right? Engagement, right? Attention drives learning. Attention drives learning. If you don't have engagement, you're not going to learn. Right? Representation, something has to be represented in your brain. So you're thinking about visuals, all, different ways to multimedia. And then action and expression. How is this student going to express their learning? And it's usually through talking.
Yes.
So understanding all of that, you can catch all students. It's not. And then I love that we're like, oh my gosh, there's this great neuroscience. But then when you think about it, it is how Indigenous people taught, right? Like storytelling, like community, like we've put this language of science, of learning, and it is actually just being human and teaching and learning in an Indigenous way. Or I think a lot about like churches, right? Like this call and response, this community, repetition, all those things that humans have done since the beginning of time, because they knew that that's how people learn. And then there was a point where we're like, no, we're just going to learn through reading and writing. And that's when we lost our way. And that's when some kids advanced and some kids didn't. You know, I have this, I went to, in Italy, there was like this anatomical theater, medieval theater where doctors from all over Europe and the Middle East would come and just dissect like the one human being that they could. And the greatest minds would come and look over and peer onto this cadaver for 3 days. And so I'm in the store, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. You know, they got the candles, I'm picturing it all. And I'm like, okay, if they're holding their candle, how are they taking notes and writing? And then the guide was like, they didn't write. They didn't read. He's like, the paper was too expensive. You know, and that's like 1,300, 1,200, 1,300.
Wow.
So it's like, oh, wow. So they had to have all those different methods, you know, like visualizing, talking, remembering, mnemonics, like all these things that we haven't used for the past 100 years. So we have kids who are special ed, kids who are neurodiverse, you know, all these like marginalized groups because they can't do it that one narrow way that we teach.
And let's talk about neurodivergence for a sec, because I'm thinking about our international school context. And I have not been in this space nearly as long as you have, but I think you're the right person to ask, given your specialty and everything. So we have Senia that's been doing a lot of work when it comes to neurodiversity and really emphasizing the need for special education and supporting students with learning disabilities. But there's still a lot that has to happen in order for us to bridge that gap between, or the connection between, neurodivergence and DEIJ. Getting people to see that, yes, if you're talking about DEIJ, neurodivergence has to be part of the conversation.
Yes.
We have to have that talk.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, in your opinion, as someone that's lived the life, as someone that has worked with different students who either have disabilities, students who are English language learners, students who are coming with these different identities, what do you think has to be done to bridge that connection between the two in our international school ecosystem?
Yeah, you know, in the US, the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, came out of the civil rights movement.
Right.
So disability rights are civil rights. So we can't say we have a DEIJ statement and we have diversity, equity, inclusion, and then right below that we accept kids with mild to moderate disabilities. You know, which means like dyscalculia and dyslexia, but anything other than that we don't accept. Okay, so that's not inclusion. If you say you're an inclusion, equity-minded school, you include every single child, whatever their ability, whatever their disability. And I think that we do not have that in international schools at all. I know that there are a couple, and you have to pay a lot of money to get in there. I think that international schools need to think more about the children than the adults. I think it's whenever I have been in a conversation about like why we can't accept that child, it is because the adults can't handle it, or we don't have enough adults, or we don't have enough resources. So, which is very confusing to me because you and I have both been in very low resource schools. And then we also see the international schools, and they do have resources and the ability to accept all students. So I think that the mindset has to really change. It's the mindset of leadership, mindset of the whole international school ecosystem. This idea of, you know, there is only one type of person who is excellent. You know, I always think that the excellence, this is the excellent school, or prep school, preparatory school. And I think it's changing. I think I know the State Department rules are changing that kids can go. There was a time when kids could only go to certain posts that had schools that could serve their needs. But now, thankfully, they're like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right, right? That I can just like say that you can't go there because you have this need. Kids now can go everywhere. So I think schools are going to have to adapt very quickly to receiving schools. It's all about the funding, unfortunately. So maybe the funds will be like, oh, we need to change our mindset about this. But I wish it was more about the mindset. Yeah.
I agree with everything you said, but then this thought came to my mind.
Right.
So with a lot of the schools, international schools, of course, that we've seen, you have your expat community, but then you also have your local staff or your staff that's in the host country or from the host country, right? I'm thinking about different countries and the lack of exposure they've had to neurodiversity or to special education and how that impacts a school's ability to provide the optimal educational experience for neurodiverse learners. Because it's a learning curve. Like
right.
I know for you and I in the States, if we have a student who we know is having some difficulties academically, ideally, they go through an RTI, go through the tiers of RTI. You have some type of RTI program, ideally. And you put in the interventions, you do the due process, and then you see that, all right, this isn't working. So now we're going to have them go through some testing to see if they qualify for an IEP.
Right.
Or a 504 plan. Or both. But we know that's the process we go through in the States. And we know how that goes. In the international school context, it depends on what school your child is in. It depends on what country you're in.
Right.
Because there's some countries who engage students in a very neurotypical way. It's basically, we study like this. Everybody studies like this. If you're struggling to adapt to this way of studying, something's wrong with you, which is then problematic. And that's compounded with the standardized testing culture.
Yes.
So there are a lot of factors that come into play in the international context. So I think about that, and I wonder how much of a factor that plays in international schools in general. Not all, of course, but in general, being hesitant to provide the learning experience that they should provide to neurodiverse learners.
Yeah, I think that, they want to be excellent. Like the international schools, there's just this culture of elitism and privilege, and that's what they want to promote. Unfortunately, the culture is changing, I'm hoping, because the younger people, the younger generations are like, we don't want that, right? I love that about the kids growing up these days. They know more and they're more open and accepting. And I think families are, and I think the schools will see they're going to get the enrollment of schools that are inclusive, right? I think I'm hoping maybe it's wishful thinking. But that's my hope. That's my hope. And that's what I'm trying to promote, as I go to international schools or speaking to you here, being a part of ALOC. I think that we're getting leaders who have the mindset, and they're going to lead these amazing schools, and they're going to be the model schools. And everybody's going to be like, wait a minute, what's going on over there? And you can be like, oh, well, this is an inclusive school. This is what it looks like.
Yes, for sure. For sure. So I want to start wrapping up the conversation because we've talked about so many awesome
I know.
things. I could talk to you
we could talk all day. I know. I'm like, oh.
I really can.
Right.
I want to ask you this because you've taught in so many different countries. I know for you, you've been in Guatemala, you've been in Italy, you've been in China, so many places. I want to know, what is the greatest lesson you've learned in all of your years of being
Oh,
an international educator? The greatest lesson you've learned?
wow. In most of those settings, well, in all of those settings, I was employed as a special educator, like learning needs specialist. And I think that has been my greatest lesson. So you think you go to these schools that are elite and privileged and that everything is great there, and it's not so great. I think that it makes me sad that those schools are so elite and so privileged that they don't see the gifts that historically marginalized populations have. And I think that's what drives me with the work that we're doing with ALAC. It's like, wow, if we could bring our own gifts, BIPOC people, kids that have neurodiversity or kids that have disabilities, this world would be so much better, right? If we could bring that culture into that space that is elite, the kids that are going to be the CEOs, right? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is what drives me, because I've been there. I was like, oh, I want to be elite. I want to be the top, because, I come from the bottom, right? And then I see it and I'm just like, I really don't want to be a part of this. I see the system for what it is. I think when you enter independent schools, international independent schools, when you're in like DC public schools, you're just like all together, like struggling together, and it's amazing.
Right.
But when you go into these international schools, I think that is a lesson, just from my point of view, is like the privilege and the elitism is just, it's like, it is okay. I don't want to now I'm like, okay, this is going to go all live and everybody's going to be like, MaryAnn, you're anti-independent schools. I'm not anti-independent schools. They're fantastic families there. I think that I love the kids. I love working in independent schools. At the same time, I think they need to change. I think they need to open up and be open to different content. That's why I'm writing curriculum for one school. They need to be open to scholarships, getting kids from your community to go to your school. It's going to be so much better for all the kids, and those types of things. So I guess I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I just had a window into different parts of society, and I'm hoping that we can come together. It's like DC public schools, independent private schools, all those kids could like jive together. That would be amazing.
I think that's the utopian world that we all aspire to have, for sure. Got one more question for you. How does Dr. MaryAnn DeRosa stay true to the teacher in her?
Oh yeah, I think that I am 100% trying to infuse joy in everything that I do. I think that I don't like boring. I had this one kid, in kindergarten who taught me. I taught kindergarten one of my first days, and he would just sit there back and forth. He'd be like, boring, boring. He would just say boring, DC post. And it was like this call to prayer, almost like boring, boring. And I hear that, and not now it's a call to action, right? I just want to infuse joy in teaching. And that doesn't mean just having fun and celebrations, but joy of learning, engaging in really rich content. Yes. I love content. I love history. I don't see it in schools. I love stories and those types of things. I think that that's kind of my next thing that I want to do. I want to make sure that I want school to be fun, I guess. I don't see that in many spaces. And with the advent of technology, which I think is wonderful, but it shouldn't replace humans. I think that's troubling to me. So I want to make sure that we stay human-centered. It's a human endeavor. So yeah, I guess that's how I stay true to the educator in me. I just find the fun in it still
Awesome.
after 25 years.
Listen,
Listen,
this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much, MaryAnn. Thank you for just taking the time to talk with us. I know you must be tired after a long day of teaching, but for you to be able to carve out an hour to really do this deep dive with me, I totally appreciate it. I really
oh,
do.
thank you so much. I didn't even see the time go by. I want to ask you a bunch of questions too. So next time, maybe I can take over as host and ask you questions next time.
Hey, we could definitely get that set up for a later date. I'm
Yeah,
always down for that. Yeah, for
I would
sure.
love to know more. I'm just like,
Yeah.
what is this book? I'm gonna look at it right now. But yeah, I want to know more. So thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
And then real quick, how can people connect with you on social media? And you can feel free to share your website as well, because I know you do some independent work with schools
Yes,
and
thank you.
consultation. Yeah.
I you can find me on LinkedIn. How do I say I don't do social media. This is terrible. I'm terrible. But I'm on LinkedIn and I do have a website. It's just MaryAnnDeRosa.com and on LinkedIn. MaryAnn DeRosa. I don't know what it is.
It is. It
Okay,
is. It
okay.
is MaryAnn DeRosa. EDD, y'all. Don't forget the
That's right.
title.
That's right. That was
Uh-huh.
a little bit of hard work there. So thank
We'll
you.
put some respect on that. All right.
Tommy,
um,
it was so good to talk to you. Thank you for connecting. Congratulations on your book. That is awesome. And I can't believe you've been doing this for 5 years. This is amazing.
yeah, it is a labor of love for sure.
I feel
Um,
honored to be a part of it.
yeah. So now you're part of our Day Talk fam now.
All right.
All right.
Thank you
Take
all.
take care. Have a great day, MaryAnn.
Thank you.
All right. All right, y'all. So we're about to end another fantastic episode of our Day Talk for Educators Live. People, I wish you all good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. We're going to do this again another time. Peace out, everybody.